So now on to more difficult problems. Let's work with restricted domains. I know you guys just loved domain and range last year, but it is peeking its ugly head around the corner right now. You don't have to know a lot, but you do have to know what a function can't be. So for example, say we have two parametric equations, x equals the square root of t and y equals 1/2 y plus 1. Oh, 1/2 t plus 1. Darn it. Okay, so now what we're going to do, just like the other one, is we're going to solve one equation for t. And typically you want to use the one that's easiest. Here, this one looks the easiest because we could just square both sides to get t by itself. And that would look like this, x squared equals t. Now, whenever we do that, something happens. We kind of take a little something away whenever we square it like that, because realize that x is very limited here in what it can become, and so is t. T can't be a negative number because it's under the radical, but that means x can't be a negative number either. So the domain of this is that x can only be 0 and greater, which you can't really tell that on this side. So if you notice something where the domain is restricted, you have to make note of that. X can only be greater than or equal to 0 here. It's actually the range, but you guys don't care. So we have to make note of that, and that does affect our later problem. So when we go in and we substitute, and we have y equals 1/2 times, and instead of t, we're going to have x squared plus 1. So really, there's not much to change about the way this looks. You could just get rid of those parentheses. But, however, like I just said, since for x equals the square root of t, x is greater than equal than 0. So that means that whenever we use this equation and like think of it graphically, you're only going to have half the values. To illustrate a little bit more clearly, let me show you on the graphing calculator. So we've got our equation is 0.5x squared plus 1, and I graph it, and you can see here that it's a whole parabola. However, if we were to graph our parametric equations, this whole left side of the graph would not even exist. That's because the domain is restricted. We can't have x values that are negative because of this equation. It's just not possible. It can't even happen. And so we have to keep that in mind, and losing this vital piece of information is a big deal. So let's make a note down here. You must note any restricted domains. And that's a really big deal, like I've said like 3 times already. So just make sure that you're accounting for that in your problems. Some situations where that comes up is especially with square roots. Also, if you did have a logarithm, we can have 0 or negatives in logarithms. And then if you have a fraction, you can't have 0 in the denominator. So those are the 3 major things that you have to worry about. But if you see them, you have to handle it. Now let's talk about trig functions.